Hi everyone, my name's Hannah Collison from Inspire Creations, and today I'm going to show you how to make Crocosmia, also known as Montbretia or London Pride. Let me give you a little image of that. There we've got a double sprig, so 2 sprigs of Montbretia with all the buds in different stages, and I'm going to show you some leaves as well, which are very simple and easy to make. If you'd like to work alongside, I've just share the kit list for you, and if you have any questions after you've viewed the video, feel free to email me on hannah@inspirecreations.uk.com. So here we go. The first thing we're going to do is make the center, which are the stamens and the pistil for the flower, and these are made using 33 gauge wires, which I've cut into 3. Now 3 of these are going to go into a T-bar shape, so you're going to need a pair of tweezers. It doesn't matter if they're angled, but you're going to need a pair of tweezers, and you're going to take your tweezers probably just over 1 millimeter from the top, so it's going to be clamped really high up, although I want a little bit of the wire end poking out at the top. And this we're going to turn over. It's all very fine work for the stamens because we want to create a hook, but just a tiny hook. The reason for it being so small is because when you put the CMC on or the paste for the actual stamen, it becomes much bigger. So we're just going to fold it over like that, tiny. And then I'm going to take the tweezers, having turned this sideways so that I can see it, and clamp, well, just short of the middle. So just come in at the top here, get hold of the top part and give it a little tweak sideways. So you end up with this tiny little T-bar. It may end up looking like an L like mine has. Okay, but bit of the wire either end to try and imagine create a T. Okay, so we'll do that to 3 of them. And then the last one, you're just going to put the hook in, but not make it into a T. So 3 with a T and 1 just with a hook. You can see that's got, again, it's just a little bit either side. They're really tiny. Any kind of tweezers will work. I mean, if you get into this, then the angled tweezers are the best ones to have. A pair of small wire cutters are always useful for your wires. That's a bit better there, that T there. Okay, and then the last one is going to have a small little hook in. Okay, so just like that. So to get the little tiny stamens which will go across the T-bar, we're just going to take the hooked one of wires out of the way, and you've just got your 3 T-bars left. And I've got a little bit of water in here. Doesn't matter if it's cold or hot, that won't make a difference. And I'm taking my T-bar end and I'm going to just try and submerge just the T part. Okay, so when we go in, just be mindful where how deep you're poking. Now, often what will happen is that the water will soak up the paper, which is absolutely no problem. But when you come now, it's moist, to dunk that into your CMC or Tylose powder, which is the brand name. Just dip the head in. Okay, so we just want the little head to be coated in a bit of the CMC. And then we're going to go back into the water just very lightly. So touch the CMC that's been captured on the T-bar, and then just give it a little spin to try and take off any major excess, and then just dip the head back again into your powder. Give it a little spin, and you end up with this blob on a stick. Just going to see if this will focus just a little bit closer. Okay, now this is quite fat at the moment. So what I want to do is either with the tweezers or your finger, this is quite fine work. We need to tease out the CMC, which should be kind of gelatinous at this point on. You should be able to manipulate it. It shouldn't be too wet that it's coming off onto your fingers, but it's not quite dry, so you can manipulate it. And we're making it come out into a nice extra size T. Now I'm just going to find a way of getting that focused on camera. Yeah, so you can see it a little bit better there. Now at the moment that looks opaque, but as it dries white. So later on we're going to be able to dust that. Now we need to do the same on our other two T-bars. So just set this somewhere upright on a piece of Oasis, or just balance it. You can bend it if you want to and just hang it over the side of a cup, something where this part's not going to be touching anything much while it's starting to set. So for the pistil, which goes in the middle, so you have 3 stamens and a pistil. This is where these simple just hooked ones come in. We're going to dunk in the water and catch it into the CMC. And then I'm going to do the same again. So it's just a double dunk, same as before. That would make you a bobblehead stamen, which, you know, if you get a bundle of those, they cost quite a lot of money. But then you could argue that the cost of these, you know, with the wires, but you could cut these in half as well if you wanted to. So we'll do the same with the second one for my second flower. And that's just so that the first one has a chance just to absorb the moisture and start to dry out. And then what I want to do is I can leave it like this, or when you look at the pistil, it's often just 2 pieces that come out. So I'm going to take my finger and thumb and flatten this, and then bravely just try and give it a snip through the center. Okay, so I'm not trying to cut the wire, I'm just making a little snip and use my finger to part that flattened disc on the wire. Now it's a bit fragile. It looks like 2 bunny ears. When you look at these in real life, they're actually flattened and curled back, but I'm loath to kind of suggest doing that because this whole thing might come off the wire. Okay, and that should dry, it should set on the wire. Failing that, if it keeps falling apart, then you could just keep the bobble, and that will be your pistil. That'll be absolutely fine if you prefer not to cut the snip. So all I've done is flattened, so I get more of a disc. This one's really tiny, so I think I'm probably going to leave it like that. Or avoiding the hook in the middle, you can cut through the center if it's a bit bigger, but this one's come out quite small. So just one little press to flatten the illusion. Oh, and that's, yeah, the snipped part has just broken off that one, so I'm just going to leave that half on there. Okay, so if you've got the cutter, the N5, which is the 6-petal cutter from Orchard Products, then it just makes your life a little bit easier. It's just a little bit less fiddly. So I've got a ball of paste here, just over 1 centimetre in diameter, and I'm just trying to roll this so that I've got it quite crack free. And then we're going to pinch out a pimple. Okay, so if you feel like your paste is a little bit on the sticky side, go ahead and just give your fingers a little rub with the corn flour, and then just hold it at about halfway and start to pinch out a stem or a pimple. It looks a little bit like a seedling shoot or golf tea mushroom, something like that. And this is quite thin because it needs to go through the hole. Okay, it needs to fit in there. that pimple, it doesn't matter the length, but just to give you an idea, it's about 1.5 centimeters long from the start of the fat end. Now, this is something that you probably get best watching rather than doing, because yours will dry out before I finish showing. So we've got the fat end now needs to be pinched out into a brim. So you can see Mexican hat is the name of the process here. We're making a Mexican hat, a peak or a witch's hat. And we're pressing with our finger and thumb all the way around. I like to put my thumb in the center at the bottom here and press right into the stem so that this part here is quite thin. So working my way around. I've done a lot of the work by hand, but this is by no means thin enough at the moment. So I'm going to take a little bit of corn flour onto my surface, and I'm going to drop that face down on there so the pimple is uppermost. And I'm going to roll, just using a paintbrush, just anything with a smooth side to it. I'm just going to change camera angle so you can see this. Okay, so I'm going to roll using my paintbrush. I'm just going to drop it down onto the pimple and rock it right into the center there, press down and roll outwards. Now you may find that you get some resistance. So if you do, put a bit of corn flour onto the stem of the brush. I don't use icing sugar for this because icing sugar, even if it's gone through a shaker, can be quite gritty, and that doesn't work for sugar flowers because they're too fine, it will show. So I'm just rolling right into the middle, so making sure that the stem of your paintbrush is touching that base there, and then you roll outwards, so you're thinning the whole area. I'm going to show you this start to finish, but then of course I've got to make another one anyway, so later on I'll read them once we've shown you how to do it without the cutter. Okay, so once you're happy that that is nice and thin, you might get a bit of suction resistant here, so you have to bring it to the edge so the air gets underneath and then you can pick it up. It's phyllo pastry thin now. Okay, that's really important. With the N5 cutter, which has got 6 petals on it, if you dust the top where you're going to cut and then just feed that over the pimple, there should be no resistance. Make sure it's aligned over the pimple centrally, and then you can press down, give it a good old rub and pull the extra paste from around, and this can all be bagged up and reused. Okay, so don't throw it away, every bit of this can be reused. Then I've got my shape in the cutter, and with my thumb I want to make sure that I've got all of those edges nice and cut through. Sometimes you get furry edges on the cutters, and that's where the cutters are not sharp at the edge, and this is the best way to make it nice and fur free. And then we've got to get this out of the cutter. That's one of the reasons why I dusted it in the first place, and sometimes if it's a little bit sticky it does cause some resistance. But now I can just use the back of the paintbrush or anything else, any other tool that you might have, the bone modeling tool, small end, just to push it through so it comes out. So you end up with your blossom, which looks quite nice as it is. Now, we need to get an indentation into here. So I'm going to use my cocktail stick, or you could use the back of a paintbrush. I'm just going to put a little bit of corn flour on there. You can also, if you're concerned about the sharpness of the stick, you can actually cut a little bit off the end here, because these are really, really pointed looking at them. So just take a little bit of the point off the end there. It starts to taper about here, so I haven't cut the entire point off. Making sure you've got the corn flour on there so it doesn't stick to your flour. Find the center, push the cocktail stick in, supporting the back, so you've got it in there by about 1/3. And then you want to start to rock the stick backwards against the flour. Mine's just, my cocktail stick is just broken. So you're starting to open up the middle. Okay, got a couple more processes to do before it's complete, so I'll show you those and then we'll have a go. I need to introduce my foam pad now. piece of sponge is quite soft, so the foam pad is something different. It's got some resistance to it, but it's not as soft as a sponge. So it's a useful piece of kit to have in your box. We need a veining tool with a sharp edge, and that we're going to use to mark in a center vein line. So we're going to draw from the opening that we've made in the middle out towards the tip of the petal. Turn, so you're placing the next petal on the surface, find the center and then draw outward. Okay, now I'm holding my tool at a bit of an awkward angle so that you've got a clear view. And you're going to go all the way around, find the middle, come out at the tip, all 6 petals. Okay, so don't worry if you can't remember all of this, because I will go through it again with you. So now I've got all 6 petals. I'm just going to change camera angle in the hope we can get a clearer picture. Yeah, all 6 petals with a line in the middle. And these, in a minute, we're just going to turn out, but I'm going to introduce the stamens now. So I'm just going to put this one down, face down. Got our three stamens and our pistil. Okay, the 3 stamens are going to be slightly lower than the pistil. Now, showing you this now in my head, I'm realizing that actually it would be better for you guys, and I hope you haven't started already, to put your stamens together before you actually make your flower. And that way, your flower is not going to dry, because mine's going to dry now. So we're just going to put 3 stamens. Doesn't matter if they're not all around. The pistil's slightly higher. And we want this set of stamens and pistil to actually be quite sticky out. So I'm going to tape down the bottom here. Come all the way down the stem, because that's going to give you the strength and the length of the stem. Okay, go all the way down so that when you feed it through your flower, you're not going to have a problem or resistance. I'll go through how to tape in a moment. And that is going to get pushed through from the front. As you hit the flower, you might need to twist it as it goes through, because there might be some resistance. So as you go through the flower, hit the tape, you need to give it a bit of a twist, and you draw that through the flower until you can't see the green anymore. And now I need to narrow my stem. So I'm going to take all 3 fingers, press. That's pressing it and hopefully securing it onto the wire. You can put a bit of glue on the wire if you wish. And then between my thumb and my finger here, I'm now going to roll. Okay, so nothing else is holding down here, just my thumb and my finger rolling to extend and taper the back. It's got quite a long stem on it. The last bit is to take your little craft scissors and cut in 2 nicks at the base, which is a fake calyx. And we can bend, because these do bend, just the head and a little bit of the stem. Okay, don't worry about the color on anything, and we can adjust the stamens in a little while, so we don't have to worry about those either. The tape itself for taping the wires actually comes in different colours, and the colours I like to use are Nile green, which is this one. I use the white, and I like to use, there is a kind of wood brown colour, which is a greeny brown twig. It's called twig colour. Okay, now the tape can be sold in a full width, which is double this, or two strips that come in one pack. So if you've got, this is 1/2 centimetre, this one, because it's a half width. If you've got the 1 centimetre wide tape, you need to cut it in half. Okay, so what you would do is take a strip of your tape, and before you stretch it, you would fold it in half again, in half again, as neatly as you can. And then you would take, once you've got that into a manageable strip size, you then take your scissors and you divide it through the middle. So if you've got the full fat tape, you need to do that, because most of your taping, until you wire up big sprays, will be the half width. Okay, and tape, when you don't have to start at a certain, well, often you have to start at a certain position, but I've only got a single wire here, but I'm going to show you how you can move the tape after just a couple of twists, and that makes it much easier, because it's very difficult sometimes to tape right up to where you're going to need it. So I've got my tape, it's nice and stretched, it doubles in size, I don't have too much of a length. Have it at an angle, lay the wire over the top, take the flap of paste that's on the other side over and make it make contact with the other side of the tape. And then you want to use your dominant finger and thumb to hold tight, pinch and twiddle, so the wire is turning. You're not wrapping your tape round like this, because that just takes too long. And then when you've twisted that and you can't twist anymore on your hands, you're going to need to stabilize the wire with your hand that's holding on and stretching and angling the tape. So here, that's going to hold on. I release up here, move my finger and thumb down further and twiddle again. So it's kind of a dual. So this hand here is holding the tape nice and stretched and tight and angled until it's needed to hold the wire while you move your fingers. And when you've got to the point where you want to come off, you can just tear it or cut it. It can be reused, so you can unravel it. Sometimes it gets itself into a very knotty mess. If I only twist it a couple of times here before I continue down the stem, it's actually movable. So I can move that right up to where I want it. And if there's a leaf end there and it's still wet, it's much easier to just give 2 twists, push up, so you're hiding the white wire. We always take the wires, always. Doesn't matter if they're green or white, we always take them. And I normally order white wires rather than green wires, because green wires are okay for leaves, but they wouldn't be okay for coloured or white petals. So to stop myself from worrying about my stock, I've only got to think about keeping up a stock of the white wires. Okay, and there are certain brands that I would recommend. The coal pit ones are good. My favourite is Sunrise, but there's only a few companies that actually sell this. There is one company that distribute it for the whole country. For the life of me, I can't remember. It's the Old Barn, but there is only one company. If you Google Sunrise wires for flowers, you'll find it. So a pencil or a dowel will work if you haven't got a 6-sided tool or the cutter. So we're just going to use the same amount of paste, so just over a centimetre, or maybe just under a centimetre. This ball has to be warmed up and crack free, and then you use one finger just to roll it into a cone. Or if you can't do that, you can just take the ball and just pinch between your finger and thumb to get a cone. The pencil, if it's leaded, then you have to be aware that that's going to go into the flower. It's going to mark it. Or you could break the lead out of that if you wanted to and just have the pencil unsharpened. Okay, but obviously the dowel, if you buy a 1/2 centimetre rounded dowel from the DIY store, just cut a bit off it and sharpen it with a pencil sharpener. That will do as well. So fat end, pencil goes into the centre of the fat end. I've put a bit of corn flour on the pencil because I don't want it to stick. It's gone into about halfway, and we're going to press against the pencil. This is the oldest way to do this flower. We've then got to mark and cut through 6 cuts. I've just got to double check that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, 6 cuts, and that will give us 6 petals. Be careful because you don't want to cut yourself. You could use a scalpel if you want to. So I'm going to line this up. So I'm taking probably about just over 1/2 centimetre. So it's about halfway down, and press down through the sugar and onto the pencil so that the blade cuts through the sugar. You'll notice I'm holding the knife here as well because I want to control what I'm doing. I don't want it to slip and I don't want to cut myself. The hardest bit with this is that you need to actually gauge how wide your petals need to be to get 6. So that's 3. Just make sure you cut through them all. 4, 5, and this is where it starts to slip. The other option, if you want to, is to pull this off, having not cut any of the slips, but having cut the indentation in the center, and you can use a pair of scissors to cut them through. Okay, so now I've got 6 petals. Okay, now once you've got your 6 petals, because this is going to dry out, I'll have to show it to you in its total before you have a go. Once you've got your 6 petals, you want to pinch and just pull a little bit to elongate and point each petal. So you can see what we're trying to do. We're trying to achieve the shape of the cutter. Yeah. Now, once you've pinched a point on each one, if you turn your finger and thumb so they're horizontal, we can now flatten each one. So we've got the point in, and now we need to flatten and broaden. They start to look like jasmine flowers, and this is certainly, jasmine flowers could be made with the cutter or this process. Okay, so we've pinched sideways and now we're flattening. And at this point, we need to go back in with the pencil and push against each petal. And you can see that we've almost got what we've created with the cutter. Okay, now if you've got the 6-sided tool, you would do it in exactly the same way, but you press against each ridge here, and that will give you a cutting line, which you then do with your scissors. Okay, so the process I'm showing you here is very similar. That would then go onto your foam pad, and you would want your sharp veining tool, and you're going to press and draw out. I find that this process though is just not as thin, so your petals are not as delicate, because the other way you're rolling, aren't you, and you're super thinning. But for a make do, it works. So now I've got my lines all the way through. I can peel those petals back. If I want to, I can make them just a little bit more shaped. So just bringing them more to a point at the tip and curling them back. Okay, and then the stamens that I prepared, before can now go in, and very carefully line it up in the center so that that hopefully comes out the back here. I mentioned glue earlier. If you wanted to glue, you could actually put just a small amount of sugar glue just where the tape starts, and that will help hold the blossom. Give it a bit of a twist so it doesn't damage the flower as you draw the stamens through. And then here we've got a smaller stem. I mean, you can get a bigger stem by using a bigger piece of paste, but we just want to use the fingers and thumb, just press that onto the stem and then roll it between your finger and thumb to elongate that stem. So this is a little bit fat, or should I say it's a little bit narrow. If I was being fussy, I'd redo this one because the back's not as long. And then you can cut in your stamen. Okay, and this will have just a little bend. All right, so that's how you make the flower, either using the six-sided pointy end of that tool, the 656 star, or a dowel or a pencil. So when I say different types of buds, there are ones that open, ones that are about to open, and then diddy ones that have very minimal detail on them. Okay, so I'm going to start, I think I'll start with the about to open ones. Okay, and you'll notice from here that they go down in size as well. So whatever you do, you need to just graduate the sizes, with the biggest one not being any larger than this part of your flower. So minus the calyx, no bigger, no taller than that. And then you know that it doesn't look odd, because of course, how can you get a flower that's smaller than the bud? Yeah. So we're going to use some of our yellow. We've got a 28 gauge wire that we've cut into 3. And for the bigger buds, if you want to, you can put a hook in. So we're just going to bend in a bigger hook than we've been using. Take a small amount of paste. Now, of course, it's very difficult to gauge the sizes, but if you start, and then you can make bigger ones and smaller ones and use that as your little guide. So I've got a small ball of paste, which is about 3/4 centimetre, and this will do one of the largest buds. Give it a good warm up to kind of squidge it in your hands. Okay, and then I want to start to roll a cone. So just put your finger over halfway of the ball and just start to press down on your palm and roll. You don't want it too long because it's difficult to get it onto the wire. For ease, we can actually feed this wire from the fat end front down through the center, find the middle of the back. If not, just pull the wire back and readjust. It's quite unusual to go in through the front, but it is an easy way of making the buds. So then we pull it through, and if you want to, you can put a bit of glue on the end, but I'm not going to. I think it'd be fine. You'll notice my hook's open a little bit, and we're going to pull that through into the main bulk, so just where the ball starts to taper. And between my finger and thumb, I'm going to twiddle some more. I don't want the wire too low down because I want it to support the shape, but what I'm trying to do now is twist the paste down the wire to create the length of the stem. While I'm doing this, this wire is moving. My finger here is just stabilizing that wire. Don't hold on to it to stop it from twisting. You need it to twist. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll be opening up a hole in the middle. So the length of this little bud, which is your largest bud, is about 3 centimeters. And we can kind of sense check it against here. That's about right. I wouldn't want it to be any bigger. Now, what I want to do is take my scissors and push the pointy end into the paste and snip down to open up one side. And we're going to do this into 3 places. So probably find you'll be able to get down lower once you've got the first cut in there. So 1, 2, 3. You may make contact with the hook, don't worry, because you can pull that back through a little bit more. So I've got 3 little parts opened. I want to make this come back into a more of a point. And then with a little bit of corn flour on my finger, my pointing finger, I want to balance each of those petals that we've created in turn onto my finger and use the cocktail stick with not too much of a point at the end, just to roll across that petal to broaden it and along. We can go till we can lengthen it a little bit as well. Maybe lengthen first and then broaden, because you'll have the texture in the right place. The lines will be going down the petal. So of course, if this is more detail than you want to put into your flower at the time, then you can simply make buds. You don't have to have them opening. I just wanted to show you how you can do that. So that's my second one. And then the third one, if you lose the point, so elongate and sideways. If you lose the point here, you can reshape it. Oops. Just if that happens, if your wire comes out, just embed it a bit more. And now if we just close those up so they kind of lock into each other, overlap, that gives you an opening bud. These are slightly bent forward as well. And the same calyx is cut in. So there's no stamen in the center, and this is looking good as the first bud. So this would then be my size guide, and each one I do from here on in will be smaller. So let's just do one of those per sprig. If you're doing more than one sprig, then just make 2 of these, okay, or 1 for each sprig. If you're just doing 1 sprig, just make 1. And then I'll show you the next one in a moment. We'll just get that one done. So the other buds are much smaller and less detailed. So these are the opening ones that I've just shown you. And then you've got, these are slightly smaller, but they've just got like a line, 3 lines on them showing that they're about to open. And then these ones don't have any detail on them at all. The calyx is in fact painted on these. So what we would use is the 28 gauge wire. You could, if you wanted to, go down to 33 for the really super fine ones. And then that would just make your stem much tinier and thinner. And you could, if you want to, put a hook in to the medium-sized ones that I'm going to show you now. So we're just going to fold over a hook and take a little bit of my yellow paste. So this time is much smaller. So if I'm measuring this out on a ruler, just about ½ centimetre. Just make sure you cover up the paste you're not using so it doesn't dry. Get it nice and warmed up, and in your hand roll into a pointed cone. And for these, because they've got lines in the top, it's okay if you continue to pierce through from the top. So fat end, push the unhooked end wire through the fat end down into the bottom, and then just bring your hook through and so embed it into the middle of the bobble bit. Then if you take hold of the whole thing and twiddle and twist, holding loosely with this so the wire can still spin, get it to elongate to the length you want. So of course it needs to be smaller than your buds that you've just made. So you could have some different size ones made in this way. And then you come back up to the top where you've got a little hole between your finger and thumb, pinch and twiddle as well. So that will close up the hole, but it will also enable you to get a nice kind of rounded top for you to mark in. So you can use a knife for this. I'm going to use my cutting wheel and just support the tip here. Position your cutting wheel probably 2/3 of the way on the bulbous part, and cut in a line that comes across and up and over the top. I like to cut through. We're going to do 3, just trying to even the distance out. But if you cut through the top and above past the top of the bud, it just makes it look a bit more natural. It kind of looks a bit kind of cut through and opening, almost opening. And these again have got their heads a little bit tipped. They are very much like the freesias. I'm not sure whether they are in fact part of that family. They could well be. There's quite a few different flowers that are formed like this. And then we're marking in the calyx as before. So you can make a selection of those. I would say let's make 4. So you've got 1 of these buds, you'd have 4 of these. I probably feel like I want 1 that's in the middle of this size-wise and then 2 smaller. So that's that one. And the tiny buds though, they're really, really quick to make, and you do use just pip-sized balls of paste. And again, once you've made, I'd recommend you make these ones first, because then you've got your size guide for the first largest one. But all it is a small pip of paste, unhooked wire. Just pop the paste onto the wire, twiddle the bottom a couple of times, twiddle the top a couple of times. So you've got what looks like a grain of rice on a wire. And then you would just vary your sizes, this one probably being the largest. And then you've got tiny, tiny ones at the end. These can have a little tweak bend in them as well. So if we make 4 different size ones of these, no bigger than the one you've just made, so make 4 of those, and let's make 5 of these, and then you'll have a really good spray. You can have, I've got less on this one, so if you are making a second sprig now, to save you time, you could make less for your second sprig. Okay, so we're going to put together, and we're going to start by, we're going to put the smallest buds in first. So we're going to start at this end. Okay, and with something like this, because I want to control the colouring, I would always do the colouring last. So it's better if you put everything together first. So we're going to take our smallest buds and have them in size order with the smallest one first. And then take the next size up, or if they're the same size, it doesn't matter. Line up the first 2 so that they, actually, let's just change that slightly. We're going to pre-tape. Now I'm left-handed, so if you're right-handed, you're going to be doing this the other way. In other words, holding the tape in your left hand. Okay, see if I can do it. So we're going to pinch over. I only want a very thin coating of tape, so I'm going to have it at quite a sharp angle. I've pinched over the little spare flap that the wire was resting over, so it's touching the tape, and that will attach it. Give it one slight twist, it's probably only a half turn, and move that tape up to the top of the wire. Bring your next little bud in. Have it so it's slightly lower than the other, and this time we're just going to twist the tape around that next bud. Okay, this is proving to be a little bit trickier than I wanted it to be, so I'm actually going to give you a different suggestion. If we get a twist of tape on the small buds, if you notice that I'm not taping all the way down, it's because it's easier, although it doesn't make it as fine, it's actually easier for the tape to stick to itself as you're taping each piece in. So I would give this a little twist of tape. So while you're watching me put this together, if you feel confident with this bit, you can always do the twisted tapes and just watch the assembly. But we don't want to go down too far, okay, just by about 1 centimetre. It's just going to make your life a bit easier if you're finding this fiddly. And I'm realizing the reason I'm finding this fiddly is because I'm trying to do it as a right-hander. Okay, pinch, twist, up, tear off. You can use scissors as well if you want. Okay. So I'm just going to change hands just because it's going to get a bit tricky for me now. So I want to line up these ends of the buds so that each new one is kind of positioned about halfway down the one before. But your tape is going in tight. And because you've already got tape on the bud you've made, you should find that if you press the two bud stems together, they will hold just momentarily and not long enough for you to be able to get the main length of tape on. Okay, so just give it one little twist and then you're going to come down to the next one. So going up in size now. Now, as you go up in size, you can also start to show a little bit of length of wire. If I show you on here, they've got a gap of wire in between. Okay, but maybe the first two don't need that. So now I'm going to leave a bit of a gap. Don't worry that they're all scrunched together because we can separate them out a little bit later. If I show you though what's happening, can you see there's a gap here, then there's a little bit of a gap here. This is slightly longer. Just use my nail to neaten this in. If you want to, if it's easier, you can actually semi-bend or partially bend the wire so that you can then position it more easily. So now this stem's getting a little bit longer, as is here. So you've got length here and here. And you can see that this is starting to grow in height. So full twist this time. I wouldn't make this one grow too much, but just remembering that you want this to have a slight slant to it. Twisting maybe 1.5 times this time. And now we're bringing in the longer ones. So I can set this down for a little bit and I can pre-tape just a twist of tape like we've just done on the little buds on the bigger buds. Your main flowers are already taped, so you would tape maybe 1 centimetre on each one of these. So all we're going to do is carry on. You'll notice now that you've got buds that might be curved. So the curve is going to start to, I'll show you on here. These are all quite straight. And then as they curve, the curve is going to concentrate on angle towards where the flowers are going to be. Okay, as if the wind's blowing this way. So if you have got curved buds, you need to bear that in mind. These ones probably, because of the height, you can see that I don't really want to have much of a stem on there, otherwise it's going to be high up. So we're going to start back to scratch here where the stem enters the paste is probably the point where we're going to tape it. So just bend your wire again. If you are looking at this, if I put this really tight, you can see we've gone from nice slope to suddenly something that's poking out quite tall. So if that's going to happen, then you can take down the main wire a bit more. So you have more of a stem gap, but that angle is not so sharp. Okay. So that's probably about right for that one. And then you won't have to worry as much with these because they're similar sized. So that's probably going to look right. And I'm going to have that one in fairly tight because it looks like it'll work. So again, just tape round your main stem to the point where you feel like when you add your next one on, there's a gentle slope rather than a sudden sharp incline. Maybe 2 or 3 twists in between each. bud. Tip that one up again. Bit of a gap, not really gappy. Tape again. So 3 twists in there. We're now on to our 2 buds. So decide which one is smaller. Probably it's the height you want to go by here. Bend again, so it's curved towards where the main flowers are going to be, the open flowers are going to be. This one's slightly out compared to the bud, but I'm not too worried. I'm leaving a similar gap down here. Check your tape's stretched. And if you need to use a new twist of tape, that's fine. It'll stick to itself. You can just finish up the old one and then start using new. So again, a similar gap here, bringing the tape round. So we've now got this effect. And we'll add in the 2 flowers, and then I'll show you how to just tweak the buds and flowers just to make it look more natural. So pick your first, the smaller flower, bend at the base, have it curling in that direction. So I've bent it quite sharply really to get it in. Again, this one can be taped in tight. And what's good is because we've pre-taped the wires, you will find that you can press and they'll stick to a little bit of the tape that's already on the main stem. But also it means that if you have got a bit of stem showing, it doesn't show white or green. It is all the same tape color. So then we're going to put the last one in. Okay, so at the moment it's all in a line. Just put that last one in, give it a bit of a gap between. Now these flowers, we've almost got, because we've only got a few wires left here, they've got a fairly thick stem, but I'm not too worried about the thickness of it. I actually need to elongate it. Excuse me. So what I've got is my 26 gauge wires. And just I've put this couple of twists on this last flower. I can add in, so just slot these in high enough up so that they're coming into about here. This is my 26. It's thicker, and I'm putting 3 in. If you've only got 28, that's fine. Just put 3 28 third cut wires will be fine. They don't have to be half cut. Just depends on the arrangement you're putting this in, whether you need a long stem or not. I never normally trim until I've assembled flowers together, and that way I know that I've got the length I need. And I'm just trying to feed these in so that there's not a notable step where you've added the lengthening wires, and then we can come down those. So this stem has come out superbly long. It doesn't need to be this long, and probably to conserve my wires and be able to use this for another sprig, I can use my wire cutters just to trim the 3 that I've just added. Okay, so this is a good length to be used for something else. And then continue your taping down. Okay, get to the end. So now you've got kind of everything all in line, and a bit like freesia, this has a curve to it. So I'm going to start by curving it, and this is the main stem I'm curving. So that will open everything up a little bit, which is another reason for not having too big a gap. But also then once you've curved it, if you then look at the stem, you want to start to move the flowers and buds so they zigzag, just roughly zigzag. They'll become less zigzag as you get to the smaller ones. Oops, be careful because they're quite wet still, so I've just broken that one. Okay, let's just adjust this a bit more so you can see what I'm trying to do. So these ones here, I can have them twisting a little bit so they're facing in, but zigzag. And that's your assembled sprig. And then I'm going to get myself set up to show you the colouring and a quick leaf. If you want to, you want to make a leaf. I'm going to use a 28 gauge wire. I'm going to show you two ways. One's actually using tape, which comes out. If you've got the thin tape, it comes out a bit small for this. But it's just a really useful thing to note. You want to be careful that you don't mark your board. So you could use just a surface on this, or the edge of your board, so that you don't mark it. You'll see what I mean in a moment. So I take a 28 gauge wire, stretch my tape. I've just got a length of tape which is probably about 15 centimeters. Make sure your tape is flat, and then you can position your wire into just under half of it. So you press that so it kind of semi-sticks, and then immediately pick up the other end. You've stretched your tape so it's tacky. Line that up with the other piece, and because you've come just short of halfway, this bit from about here has no wire in it at the top, because we want that area to trim. So you can press, you can use your rolling pin to press. This is the bit you've got to be careful. If you're using your rolling pin, you don't want to mark a groove in your board from the wire. Using the 28 gauge wire, not so much of a problem. And then you've got a wire embedded in your tape. And if you use your large scissors just to cut a point in the top here, looks like a blade of grass. And then if we turn this so that the point that you've just cut is facing you, it's much easier to cut the point at the other end. Turn it over and cut the point at the other end. Okay. And then you can curve it, and you've got yourself a little bit of foliage. Now, if you have the wider tape, you can make bigger, longer, fatter ones, and they would lend themselves to the Montbretia, which, if you have seen this in the garden, you've got great big, long, wispy, hangy leaves, and then these just like hang off it. It's like grass almost. So that gives you a bit of an idea on how you can make one like this. The other option would be to use a bit of green paste, which I know I've got because I've just coloured it. There we go. A bit of green paste. And if you take yourself, this time, a 26 gauge wire or a 28, the only problem with the 28 is it's a little bit bendy. Okay, so it's a little bit harder to do your twiddle and twist. I'm just going to show you this quickly. Into a ball, into a fat sausage. Doesn't matter if it's pointed or otherwise. Push your wire in. If the paper starts to unravel, just twist the wire in the opposite direction so it closes up as it goes through the wire. You can come down and through. Pinch and twist, so allow the wire here to move, keeping it fatter in the middle and narrower at the ends. Start to roll so you get a thin sausage. It's not going to be quite a sparkler because it's fat in the center. Just get it so it wraps over the end of the wire. So just folding that over and roll it between your palms. Okay, a little bit of corn flour so it doesn't stick. And you can, if you're gentle with this, you can use your rolling pin to start to flatten your leaf. Don't get it too thin because it will, the wire will start to come through. Oops, sorry. Drop that onto your foam pad. So this is actually quite thick. You could put it through a veiner, but I didn't put a veiner on the list, so we're not going to do that bit. But if you put it through a veiner, you can either put it through a poppy veiner that's got lines on it, or you could just put it through the back of any veiner. If you haven't come across the veiners before, don't worry for this. I've got a plastic sheet here. I could press it on there to get it thin as well. So this is like a makeshift make do leaf. You could take this one step further by texturing. I'm just using the sharp veining tool again. So we're just drawing a center line. Hold on to the wire while you do this. And then you can draw lines either side. So you've got the texture of them. Things like daffodil leaves, grass. There's so many leaves that have got this kind of texture. And then we can thin the edge. Now, be careful when you do this because it's quite fat. You might end up making it kind of splidge out in some areas, but not in others. So it ends up looking a little bit uneven, but that will thin the edges for you. And then we can curve it. Just run my finger and thumb just either side of the center to close it up a little bit. And that will turn into an elongated leaf. So no cutter, but you can buy cutters for that. And you can see how that would look quite nice behind. On this flower, these are much longer, but long ones I'll leave up to you because they're quite difficult to do. So to colour, this has got just tinges of orange and red or plum on it. So I've got red or plum petal dust and I've got yellow moss green. So to get your orange, you would use your yellow and red or yellow and plum. And we've already got a yellow base on here. So if we take a little bit of my lemon yellow petal dust and some of my red or plum, it doesn't matter, it still makes orange. That's why I've got to give you the option, not everyone's got red. So bring some of that onto your tissue and work it into your brush. You'll soon know if you've got the right strength as you start to dust. So first of all, we can dust up our stamens because they should be dry now. So just catch the edge of the brush onto the tip of the stamens. And as you colour, you're going to find that that colour is just going to fall onto your other petals. If you work the colour into your brush a bit more like blusher, you'll find you won't have as many dusty bits. It'll be more embedded in here and you'll have more control over where the colour goes. So you want to catch the edge. So I'm going to brush the bristles against the pointed outside edge of each petal on the flower and just keep drawing down. And what you'll end up with is something that starts to look a little bit like a burnt edge. I'm just going to show you one flower because once you've done them all. So I just do a couple of the petals. So just brushing from the outside edge down. That's the rule, outside edge down, okay? And you'd go all the way around your petals. Then you can add in a little bit of your orange blush from the base up. Where the stamens, where the calyx is. Okay. So you can see I've done that on here. Your buds, I've made them a little bit deeper so we can go in with a bit more red or plum to our yellow. Always mix your colours just to check. And then the same principle on all of these buds would be the top edge down. And the more you dust over that top edge, draw down, top edge, draw down. So even if you wanted colour here, you'd still start at the top. Otherwise, you end up with like a tide mark. And just keep going, keep going, keep going until you've got the depth of colour on there and all of these. And remember to get deeper colour on the base. And when you've got to the point where you're happy with your dusting, there's a little bit, this is where, if you remember at the beginning, I mentioned I'd forgotten to ask you to get a fine paintbrush and some alcohol. This is just 1 drop or 2 drops of gin or vodka. And if I take my red or plum and just mix that in there, I want something that's slightly thicker than water. Well, it's probably watercolor. Twist the brush so that the brush loads up with the color but comes to a point. And this, the only place this is found is once you've colored this, the dots, there's little dots. If you just support your hand with the other one and just come in here and just put little dots just at the beginning of the funnel shape you created for where the stamens went in. Yeah, just a circle of dots just where you opened out with the cocktail stick, if you remember that far back. Okay, and your leaf can have a little bit of just the pure green dusted on it. So I'm gonna carry on coloring, and once I'm finished, this would just be added onto the back like so. Yeah, so I'll show you what that looks like shortly on record. I just want to deepen this now. Now I've got a bit of, I'm a bit more confident and I can see how it's going to come together. You can, once you've coloured fully, you can actually set the kettle, you know, put the kettle on and let the steam come out of your kettle. And from about a distance of about probably 4 inches, probably about 10 centimeters, no closer, you can waft the flower sprig in the steam. And what that'll do is semi-melt the paste and it makes the petal dust stick. So you get a more blended look. And of course, any loose petal dust, then most of that will have gone and it won't transfer onto your cake when you put your flowers on your cake. So this is, I'm kind of oranging it up base and top, but then I can come back and I can give it just pure red if I want to on the edges. So it really depends on how mature the flower is. And like I said before, if you want to draw that color down more for the back, you still start at that top edge. So you can see there is a marked difference. The little dotties in there do make a difference as well. So this is a bit darker still, and I just want to catch the edges just to give it that little extra rich. And the technique's applied to the buds as well. Has anyone got any questions about what they've learned today? If you have, you can email me. The email address was on the at the beginning of the video. Okay, it's just the spray with a little sprig of leaf on there, which is an extra. You don't need to put that on there. So I hope you enjoyed the class today. And as I said, feel free to email me with any questions, and I'll look forward to seeing you again. Bye-bye for now.